Hey everyone, hope you're well. Today we're going to have a walkthrough tutorial and somewhat of an analysis of the very famous solo to Blue Oyster Cult's Don't Fear the Reaper by the legendary BOC guitarist Buck Dharma. Now obviously this will not be the first tutorial for this famous solo that you'll find on YouTube or elsewhere, but I'm striving to make it the most accurate, and I'll also dig into some of the theory behind it in the first few minutes of this video. The stuff that gives this solo its really unique voice and style. So let's close in here a little bit on the fretboard and get started, shall we? Alright then, first up, we are in standard tuning for this tutorial and we'll be soloing over two simple chord changes. F minor to G7. Back and forth. Over these chords, we're going to be using a slight variation of the F melodic minor scale to solo within. We are going to be changing one note, and we'll also be using the C harmonic minor scale, a scale which is almost the same as our variation on the F melodic minor, but to get into C harmonic minor, we're going to be changing yet again one more note. I'll explain all of this in a moment. But regardless, we will be going back and forth between the two scales as we follow the F minor and the G7 chord. First up, the F melodic minor and why we're using it and why we're changing it ever so slightly. Now, the F melodic minor is a very popular scale in jazz music. Not used a whole heck of a lot in rock and hard rock music in a general sense. It's used, of course, but not very much. However, this being a very outside-the-box type of minor key rock solo, to get what he was looking for in this regard, Buck Dharma needed something with somewhat of a different voice and flavor than simple pentatonic or natural minor to give this solo its unique tonal variances. So he chose to go with the F melodic minor. Now then, while we're over the F minor chord, we're going to be using our variation on the F melodic minor. So let's dig into that right now. But first, let me show you the unmodified version of the F melodic minor, starting on this note, this F note here at the 10th fret of the G string. That's the F melodic minor. On the top three strings in the position that we'll be doing the majority of our soloing in for this one. However, like I said, we're going to be changing one note in it. That one right there. We are going to sharpen this B flat at the 11th fret of the B string up to a B at the 12th fret, giving us this. We can still consider this F melodic minor, but now with a slight variation, and a variation that ultimately gives this solo all of its flavor, making it less jazzy and more exotic sounding. But there's another reason behind the sharpening of that note as well. Remember this. The prelude to the solo. Well, that continues to play throughout the entire solo if you're listening closely, and not just as the lead-in. And it includes all the notes from our F minor, F melodic minor, except that one. It uses that one. So thus the sharpening of that note, up the B flat up to a B. Now then, that is the scale that we're going to use to solo over our F minor chord, this variation of the F melodic minor. Now when we're over our G7s, we're going to make another change. We're going to flatten this E at the 12th fret of the high E back to an E flat to get this. So then, now we end up having what we started with, the F melodic minor scale, now with two variations. Surely we're now talking about a completely different scale altogether, right? And yes, you would be correct in that assumption, because now with these two changes to the F melodic minor, we're now using a series of notes that correlate perfectly with the C harmonic minor scale in this position. So how does this work? Why are we soloing in C, C harmonic minor, over our G7 chord and not using maybe a G scale or staying strictly in our variation of the F melodic minor? Well, I'll tell you why. In a general sense, by using the harmonic minor scale, if you're using it in rock music or if you're using it in any music, like our little variation on the F melodic minor, it produces the same tonal effect, that being creating that exotic Middle Eastern sound that we're going for in this one. And you can apply the harmonic minor scale not only over the same key as the scale being used, in that case it would be C, of course, but you can also use it over certain dominant seventh chords from another key. And in the case of C harmonic minor, the dominant seventh chord that we can solo over is, you guessed it, G7. The exact chord that we're using in this case. This is because the dominant seventh chord is built off the fifth degree of any key's major scale. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, also known as the dominant note of the scale. And in the case of C major, our dominant fifth note is G, which of course is the root of the G7 chord that we're going to be soloing over. That means you can use the C harmonic minor scale to solo over the G7 chord quite nicely, because G is the dominant fifth note of the C major scale. Make sense? I hope so. Now, whether any of this was going on in the head of Buck Dharma when he was sitting down to compose this solo is beyond my knowing. But, maybe he was just finding notes that worked over F minor and G7 with the F melodic minor as his base scale. But, from strictly a standpoint of theory, that's what's going on here. Regardless, that is the nuts and bolts of this solo. So let's move on and learn how to play it, shall we? All right then, before we dig into the solo proper, I'm going to show you the little interlude in the middle of this song, the little prelude to the solo, if you will. Playing little triads right here. That little section there. We're on this starting on an F note here because we're in F. 10th fret of the G string. We're going to go 10, 9, 8. All downstrokes. 5 times. Now we're going to play the same pattern, starting on the same note, that F note, but on the B string we're going to go 8, 7. And when you're in this position, you're going to play 6 times. So in this position, 5 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, shift, 6 times. Back, 5 more. Shift, 6 more. And we're going to kind of end on that note there. And then that leads right into the solo. And that's the first little lick of the solo. So we're going to very quickly slide into 15 of the high E string and start tremolo picking as fast as we can. Now, the very first note you hit, you're going to pull it off to 13 and immediately back onto 15, and then start tremolo picking. Kind of like that. And then after you tremolo pick that, 10 times, you're going to grab that 15 and give it a half step bend. And then you're going to drop back off to 13, do a little trill between 13 and 15, back to 13, and then slide it back to 12. And then you're going to go 13, 15, double hit, and then drop onto 15 of the B string. And when you get onto that note, you want to give it lots of vibrato. of like that. And then we're into this. So now we're going 15, 16, back to 15. I think we're starting with a double hit of the 15 of the B. And then 16 back to 15. Down to 13 of the high E and back to 16 of the B. Then you're going to drop onto the 15 of the high E for a half step bend release. And when you get it back to the natural note at 15, you're going to pick it. And the moment you release that bend at 15, you're going to immediately slide into 19 of the high E and pick it 3 times. Kind of like that. And then after you pick it the 3rd time, you're going to let it sit just for a split second, and then you're going to raise it a half step and release it back off to 15. For a double hit. And then you're going to do a little trill between 15 and 16, back to 15. And at this point, I'm on that note with my index. At this point, when I'm going to hit one single note of that 15, I'm going to shift fingers to get ready for the next lick. Just like that. I'm just going to shift fingers. Right there, I'm shifting from index to middle for that note. And then we're into this lick. So 15 on to 16, and then pull it off to 15, pull it off to 13. Back onto 15. And now a little trill between 13 and 15, and then slide it back to 12. And then drop back onto the 13, and that finishes that little lick. So up to that point, slowly. And then we're into this. So we're going up to the 15 of the B, double hit, and then down to 12 of the high E, onto the 13 of the B. And then you're going to do a little trill between 12 and 13, back to 12, and then pick it again. And then do almost the exact same thing on the G string. A little hammer on from 12 to 13, pull it back off to 12, and pick it again. Kind of like that. Now we're going to go back to 15 of the high E. Into that lick. So you're going to double hit that 15 of the high E, give it a half step bend release. And then we're going to go off to 13 and then off to 11. And there's that E flat as part of the C harmonic minor, right? Up to 15 and then up of the B and then back to 11. Basically just a little scale run, right? So now we're going 13 back onto 15. And when you get back to that 15, little half step bend release. And then you're going to do another little, when you get back to that 15, you're going to do another little trill between 13 and 15, slide it back to 12, drop back onto the 13, and now we're going to do a double trill. and when you release it off the second trill, you're going to pick that 12 again. We're trilling on the 12-13 of the B. And then you're going to jump up here to the 13 of the G. Pick it twice, slide it back to 12, and then off to 10. And then hammer back on to 12 of the G to finish that little section. So from here. Right, so one more time. And then we're into this, we're closing out the solo here. So we're doing a little bar here on the 12s of the G and the B. And then we're going down to the, we're hitting that 12 of the G, we're going down to 13 off to 12, back up to 12 of the G. You're going to do that twice. And then you're finally going to grab that 12 and slide it back to 10. And then we're into this little lick. So we're going to go 10, 12, 13. And then just ride down the 13s of the B and the high E. And kind of let those notes ring together. And then back to the 10, back onto the 12 of the G. And then we're kind of letting that note sit and marinate a little bit on the 12 of the G. And then we're going to come up here to the 15. We're going to give that little half step bend release. Back to the 12 of the G for a double hit, slide it back to 10, let it sit, and then hit it one more time, slide it into 12. And that's the end of the solo. I don't think he hits that twice. I think he hits it once and slides. And then picks it. So nice and slow all the way through. Feedback. And that's it, my friends. That is how you play that one. That famous, very famous solo to Don't Fear the Reaper by Buck Dharma. I certainly hope you found that helpful and maybe interesting from a standpoint of theory. If you did, please hit the like button. Drop me a subscribe if you haven't done that already. That would be awfully nice. And hope you're well out there in your little guitar corner of the world, wherever that may be. And we'll see you next time.